Part 50. A Middle School Cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 493. Compared to the cartoonist Fukuda and the Mohawk assistant who observed the One Punch Man comics, Takahashi Makoto spent much more time observing Fukuda's new comics. After the silver-haired boy Fukuda finished reading the One Punch Man comics, he complained to Yoshida for a while before Takahashi Makoto finished reading the new comics that Fukuda had completed. I feel the whole world's malice towards me. This is the feeling that Takahashi Makoto expressed after he put down the comics and pondered for a long time. Whether it is the editor-in-chief Yoshida or the cartoonist Fukuda, they all feel that they can't continue the topic of Takahashi Makoto's sudden sigh, not only because of the interference of Takahashi Makoto's melancholy and nostalgic tone, but more because of the resentful look on the face of a certain middle school cartoonist at this moment. This comic. After getting the silver-haired guy's approval, Yoshida took the comic manuscript from Takahashi Makoto. After just observing the first part of the comic manuscript, Yoshida showed a surprised look on his face, and asked the silver-haired guy with some uncertainty, "Hey, Fukuda-kun, is this comic your new work?" Tisk. Of course, the silver-haired guy Fukuda heard the doubt in Yoshida's tone, and his expression immediately became a little unfriendly. "The plot of this comic, but I suddenly thought of it recently." He. After hearing what the silver-haired guy said, the Mohawk assistant on the side showed a weird smile on his face, and unceremoniously exposed the silver-haired guy's lie. "Teacher Fukuda, didn't you say that the inspiration for this comic came from a nightmare that scared you so much that you couldn't fall asleep? And the real thing of the important stone mask in the comic is the cheap goods I sold to you for less than 300 before. Anshuoka, you guy." Before he could show off, his assistant broke the news. It was obvious that the silver-haired guy was unhappy. And do you know, the Mohawk assistant Anshuoka completely ignored the gloomy face of the silver-haired guy, and took out a stone mask from the cabinet beside him, and continued to happily break the news to Takahashi Makoto and Yoshida. "I have seen it more than once. Teacher Fukuda has worn this on his face. At first I didn't know why, but when I helped Teacher Fukuda complete the comic manuscript, I understood it. Anshuoka, if you shut up immediately and don't say anything, I will give you an extra 200 per hour in the future, raising wages." This is the most effective and powerful way for the silver-haired guy to control his assistants. 200, Assistant Yasuoka seemed quite dissatisfied with the proposal of the silver-haired brother Fukuda. "What about the cost of fighting with you before? Don't forget that this proposal was my idea. Don't go too far, Yasuoka." When mentioning this, the silver-haired brother Fukuda wiped the corner of his mouth quite unhappy. "You made this suggestion at the beginning, actually deliberately looking for an opportunity to fight me, right? But this is what you accepted yourself, Mr. Fukuda." Yasuoka spread his hands indifferently. "In order to be able to draw the battle in the comics more exciting, it is very necessary to experience it yourself, Mr. Fukuda." You quite agreed with this opinion at the time. This inexplicable sense of déjà vu, why do I feel like I have seen it somewhere before? Listening to the mutual complaints between the silver-haired brother Fukuda and his assistant, Yoshida secretly turned his eyes to Makoto Takahashi, who was still in deep thought, and Yoshida suddenly realized. Isn't this the favorite thing of a certain middle school cartoonist? Oh? Do you deduce and complete the comics through actual combat? Takahashi Makoto suddenly interrupted. Tisk. I'm a real combat guy. The silver-haired guy looked at Takahashi Makoto unkindly. "By the way, Chan, you haven't spoken since you finished reading the comics. Are you dissatisfied with my new comics? Or is it because my comics are too exciting that you are addicted to them?" You should know that since his debut as a cartoonist, most of the comics by the silver-haired guy Fukuda are comics with bad boys as the protagonists, and most of them are the kind of boy-oriented and violent style. But now this comic, whether it is the setting of the protagonist or the style of the whole comic, is completely different from the past. So compared with the previous Little Otter and Yachin Mu Menjai, the silver-haired guy Fukuda is full of confidence in his comics. This confidence is not only derived from the breakthrough of the silver-haired guy Fukuda's comic style, but also the changes in the comic plot. Humph. Don't think I didn't hear your conversation just now when I was fighting the evil of this world. Takahashi Makoto naturally wouldn't tell the silver-haired guy Fukuda that he had read this comic before. Looking at the Mohawk assistant Engon with some bruises on his face, Takahashi Makoto turned his gaze back to the silver-haired guy Fukuda, and showed a devilish smile on his face. Hey, silver-haired guy, I'm actually a practical guy too. In order to complete a great and interesting comic before, I deliberately imprisoned my cat and had a good fight with Sebastian, who turned into a lancer. So, do you want to take this opportunity? I refuse. The silver-haired guy Fukuda decisively rejected Takahashi Makoto's proposal. What a joke. Many cartoonists know that in addition to possessing monster-level physical strength that can stay up all night to complete the manga manuscript, Fukuda wants to complete it through actual combat. Comic manuscript, but I won't embark on the journey of challenging non-human beings just for the comic manuscript. But the silver-haired guy. Makoto Takahashi gently raised the manga manuscript in his hand and smiled like a devil. In your manga, the male protagonist fights non-human beings, in order to make you draw better comics. I originally existed as a demon god, but I deliberately lowered my status to fight ordinary people like you. He has already admitted that he is a non-human guy. Fukuda, who has no taste for sadism, naturally has no interest in fighting Takahashi Makoto. Ah, silver-haired brother, you are just like your good friend Ajuma Menha, and your love for comics is not deep enough. Makoto Takahashi shook his head with some regret, and looked away from the side, with a look of nostalgia on his face. The look on his face said, I think that in order to complete that interesting and great comic, the King of Black Flame took the risk and watched the weakened version of the opening battle. Sure enough, human beings now have lost their faith and have completely fallen. In terms of martial arts, is Mr. Phoenix Academy very powerful? Looking at the strange expression on the silver-haired brother Fukuda, the Mohawk assistant Yasuoka was a little curious. Is it better than Mr. Fukuda, a guy who looks like a delinquent? Is it even more powerful? Is your opponent a Mohawk? Makoto Takahashi showed a troubled look on his face after hearing his assistant Yasuoka's question. It is said that against a guy with a Mohawk, the best choice is of course Baidu. But if you are not careful, someone will die. I had heard Fukuda say before that the cartoonist Phoenix Inferno is really a Chuyunibu. Now after Yasuoka heard Takahashi Makoto's words, he finally believed it. Of course, if you insist on fighting me. Makoto Takahashi stood up, pulled up his white coat, made a classic hand gesture, and said calmly to his Mohawk assistant Yasuoka, so, Wing Chun, IP man. Please give me some advice. Cough, cough, cough. The weather has gotten colder recently and I can't stop coughing. Dear readers, please go to bed early and keep warm when the weather is cold. Above meow. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 494. Chapter 494. Want to gain pleasure, but also don't want to lose. Hunter x Hunter is a new comic. Little Sea Otter is preparing to submit to the serialization convention. The soul of the game is a manga that Ajuma Menha is preparing to submit for a new serialization. Just these two new comics that were ready to be submitted to the serialization meeting were enough to make Takahashi Makoto, who was preparing to serialize One Punch Man, very entangled and depressed. However, after going to the silver-haired guy's studio, he observed the cartoonist Fukuda. After preparing a new comic for serialization, a certain middle-class cartoonist truly felt the hostility of the entire world towards him. Because the new manga by the silver-haired boy Fukuda, like the new manga by Ajuma Menha and Little Sea Otter, are about to submit to the serialization conference, it is also one of the classic works of the other world that Makoto Takahashi is extremely familiar with. The comic begins with a story about the love and murder between a rich boy and his adopted son. As the story develops, fantasy creatures like vampires appear in the plot. That's right, the silver-haired boy Fukuda just came up with it recently. This new comic is the famous comic JoJo's Bizarre Adventure with its weird and cool painting style and breathtaking plot. So, after observing this comic in the Silver-Haired Brothers studio, when Takahashi Makoto looked at Fukuda, who is also a cartoonist, his eyes were full of jealousy and envy. Jealousy, the reason is the same as before. This comic is also a comic that Takahashi Makoto wanted to draw but didn't have time to draw. It's like a daughter who has been raised for many years will be suddenly killed by an unknown child one day in the future. It's as if the bastard has been abducted. Isn't this sad feeling of taking care of someone for a long time but being snatched away halfway not enough to make people jealous? What's more, Takahashi Makoto endured such an experience 3 times in one day today. As for envy, you must know that this comic is a super long series, which can be classified as a lifetime series comic like a certain work about a certain death god elementary school student. Being able to continue to serialize such a long masterpiece, for other comics for everyone, this is something to be envied, but what Makoto Takahashi really envies is that the silver-haired boy has the will and consciousness to persevere. Because this is what a certain middle-level cartoonist currently does not have, and has always longed to have. It is not a shameful thing to envy what you don't have but what others have, because this is the original sin of mankind. However, what Takahashi Makoto really feels at this moment, is the malice coming from the world. Originally, Makoto Takahashi thought it would be very interesting to submit the comic One Punch Man to the new serialization meeting. Especially after the editor of the weekly magazine was tortured by the original comic manuscript, and then submitted an improved cartoon manuscript. Through the contrast of different styles of the same comic, it was a perfect plan to tease the editor of the weekly magazine and gain pleasure. But, please take a good look at some of my colleagues on the manga artist side. Whether it is Hunter x Hunter or Soul of Chess, or even the later JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, several colleagues on the cartoonist side are preparing to submit new comics to the serialization meeting one by one. They are all extremely brutal works. Even Takahashi Makoto is very confident in the comic One Punch Man, but facing so many brutal level comics, a certain second-grade cartoonist no longer feels like we have no opponents ahead of us. Let's not talk about whether the comic One Punch Man can compete with other classics. As long as a few colleagues on the cartoonist side can choose a comic and submit it to the serialization conference at the same time as One Punch Man on, Makoto Takahashi's perfect opportunity will definitely fail, for sure. What is this? Hey, my beloved cat, I feel deeply at this moment that the whole world is full of malice. After coming out of the studio of the silver-haired brother Fukuda, Makoto Takahashi led Yoshida back. I kept feeling this way over and over again along the way. When Yoshida heard this, the corners of his mouth twitched. Although at this moment, he really wanted to ask Makoto Takahashi, what the hell is the malice of the world, but considering the bad taste of a certain middle-class cartoonist, a certain editor-in-chief he tried hard to suppress his curiosity and didn't ask any further questions. And, although I don't understand what's going on with Makoto Takahashi's current state, it's an excellent opportunity for Yoshida. I'm talking about Aiken, Hiramaru-kun's Hunter x Hunter, Ajuma Menha's Game Soul, and Fukuda-kun's JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Are their new comics really exciting? I heard. After Yoshida's words, Takahashi Makoto's face became a little unhappy, but a certain editor did not notice the situation. Instead, he continued to speak as if he was talking to himself. As your editor, I have worked with you for so long. Over the years, I have rarely seen you show that kind of surprise when you see new comics. My beloved cat, about this, I remember I told you before. Makoto Takahashi pulled the white coat on his body, turned his head and looked at the sky. The series I have published since my debut comics, even the comics I see today, I have seen them in another world. That's right. Like my soul, Those 3 comics come from that world. You still won't believe it, but this is. Is it Stein's Gates' choice again? Okay, let's change the topic. Yoshida did not take the serious words of a middle-class manga artist seriously. Instead, he waved his hand feebly and turned to stare at Takahashi. Cheng asked seriously, I remember when you saw Jing Hikun's comic Jean, you were as surprised as you are today, right? Could it be that, the 3 comics you saw today will also be the same in the future? Will it become a popular comic like Jean which is serialized in the current monthly magazine? Humph, of course there is no doubt about this kind of thing, Makoto Takahashi answered decisively, without any hesitation. Then Cheng. Hearing Takahashi Makoto's quick and concise reply, Yoshida showed a sinister smile. It was finally time to show his fangs to a certain middle-class cartoonist. Do you think your new comic is the current One Punch Man with its magical style? If it competes with those 3 comics at the serialization conference, Cheng, are you confident that you will get the chance to be serialized in a weekly? Whether the original comic version of One Punch Man can be serialized in a weekly magazine is a question. If it really wants to compete with those 3 comics for serialization opportunities, Takahashi Makoto did not answer Yoshida's words, but the answer is something like that. In fact, it is already very obvious. Although it seems aggrieved to cover up with silence, what a certain middle-class cartoonist uses is only madness, not arrogance. Cheng, the result is very obvious. If One Punch Man only relies on the current style of painting, it is simply impossible to compete with those 3 comics for serialization opportunities. Seeing Takahashi, Cheng rarely fell into silence, and Yoshida did not hesitate to take advantage of the victory. Although I don't have the ability to accurately predict comics like Eiji Niizuma, but based on my many years of experience as an editor, as long as I can seriously modify the comic's One Punch Man style, then I believe your comic will definitely pass the serialization meeting. Revise the comic manuscript. Makoto Takahashi hopes to torture and tease viewers through comics to gain pleasure, but Makoto Takahashi also doesn't want to lose. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 495. During this period, Yoshida was very surprised because a certain Chuyuni cartoonist actually stayed at home to complete the comic manuscript, instead of going out and causing trouble like before. And what made Yoshida the happiest was that his persuasion of a certain Chuyuni cartoonist seemed to have achieved unimaginable results. In the past few weeks, in addition to completing the comic manuscripts that were still being serialized, the remaining little time was basically spent on revising the comic manuscript of One Punch Man. Of course, if Yoshida hadn't learned something from Yujiro, perhaps Yoshida's joy would have continued for a long time. Oh, my cat, you really know how to choose the time to appear. Takahashi Makoto, who had just revised the content of the first episode of the comic One Punch Man, had no time to rest before he saw his editor-in-chief with a gloomy face, staring at him viciously. Speaking of your expression, my beloved cat, yeah, it's very good. If I hadn't had the chance before, I would have seen your expression a long time ago. At this time, Cheng, do you still have the heart to joke with me? After Yoshida learned some news from his editorial colleague Yujiro, he rushed to Takahashi Makoto almost immediately. Do you know? Yeah, I know, Takahashi Makoto interrupted Yoshida's impatient words without hesitation, turned his head to look at the empty cat bed next to him, and whispered, if it weren't for my pity for Liuli, I have always wanted to see the cat's tail being stepped on for a long time. Seeing your expression, my beloved cat, the obsession that has been entangled with me for many years has finally dissipated completely. After hearing Takahashi Makoto compare himself to a cat whose tail was stepped on, Yoshida, who was already in a bad mood, became even uglier after hearing Takahashi Makoto's words. "But my cat, I won't say thank you to you." Takahashi Makoto looked at the silent Yoshida, his tone full of infinite emotion. "Be careful not to play you badly, and be careful not to force you into a completely blackened collapse. Yeah, anyway, it's not easy to keep you captive all these years. That thing was instigated by you, Makoto, right? If it were any other time, Yoshida would definitely complain and refute Takahashi Makoto, but today, the reason why Yoshida rushed to Takahashi Makoto so hurriedly was to ask about the thing he heard from his colleagues. "Ah-chan, please don't play dumb and say you don't know. You know, I was there at the time." "Eh? My beloved cat, I don't quite understand what you mean. Can you still speak human language?" Takahashi Makoto looked at Yoshida with some doubts. "Let's not talk about what I instigated. Even if I plan to destroy humanity and society, I seem to have always said it openly, right?" "Huh? Do you remember what you said in Fukuda-kun's studio before?" Yoshida looked at Takahashi Makoto, who looked like he had nothing to do with it, and laughed in anger. "Didn't you tell Fukuda-kun that you would start a comic showdown in the weekly magazine?" "Huh? Did I say such a thing?" Takahashi Makoto pretended to try to recall. "Takahashi Makoto, if you continue to provoke Yoshida like this, maybe a responsible editor will really go crazy." "I didn't say it, Ah-chan. Do you remember what you said before you went to Fukuda-kun's studio and before observing the comics for Fukuda-kun?" Yoshida looked like he was really stimulated. "Declaration of war, that's what you told Fukuda-kun." "Humph, Chan, do you dare to pat your chest and say you didn't say that?" "My beloved cat, although I know you hate humans and the world as much as I do, but..." Takahashi Makoto looked at Yoshida with some contempt, shook his head helplessly, and said with regret, "Now is a peaceful era. So it's better not to talk about declarations of war anytime and anywhere. Even if you, my beloved cat, want to destroy the world, you can't be so blatant. Do you want to attract the attention of Gaia Loli and then be attacked by the heroes of the Hall of Heroes? If you really have this great awareness, then as a respect for your awareness, I will temporarily condescend to Gaia Loli and kill you with my own hands. Now is not the time to say these things, Chan." Yoshida was about to collapse at Takahashi Makoto's increasingly biased remarks. "Do you know what happened after what you said to Fukuda-kun?" "Oh, my beloved cat, I can see from your expression that something interesting must have happened, right?" Makoto Takahashi looked at Yoshida's anxious look, and the fatigue from completing the comics was instantly swept away. He asked Yoshida expectantly, "Hey, my beloved cat, what interesting things happened afterwards? Was it because of the war declaration that a lot of demons and devils were summoned? Or was it because of the gathering of 7 cartoonists that a dragon that could fulfill 3 wishes appeared, or did it lead to the advent of the Holy Grail that could fulfill wishes?" After repeating deep breaths many times, Yoshida slightly suppressed the anger that was about to burst out, and tried to use a calm tone to slowly tell Makoto Takahashi the whole story. Makoto Takahashi once said in the studio of the silver-haired brother Fukuda that the reason why he gave several cartoonists to observe the comic draft of One Punch Man was actually to launch a declaration of war, and a certain middle-level comic at that time. "I was so stubborn that I mentioned the names of several cartoonists to the silver-haired brother Fukuda. So, the silver-haired boy Fukuda decisively believed it. Since a certain middle-class cartoonist wants to start a war like a cartoon showdown, then as a cartoonist, let's fight it openly and openly. And this war, first of all, starts from the serial meeting." The silver-haired brother Fukuda, who had such an awareness, took the initiative to withdraw the new comic that had been submitted to the serialization meeting, that is, the comic JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Despite the obstruction of the editor-in-chief Yujiro, the purpose is to wait until Makoto Takahashi submits One Punch Man to the serialization conference in the future, so that he can start fighting from the serialization conference. Later, the behavior of the silver-haired brother Fukuda aroused the interest of Takahashi Makoto's ally, the manga artist Eiji Niizuma. Through the narration of the silver-haired brother Fukuda, the new wife Eiji, who is full of interest, also decides to join this war. Moreover, when Eiji Niizuma decided to join the war, he also invited several cartoonists on the cartoonist side. As a result, this war has escalated without any suspense. It has changed from what the silver-haired brother Fukuda thought was a one-on-one fight to a big brawl between several cartoonists on the side of the cartoonist. In other words, because of my casual remarks at that time, this big fight on the manga artist's side was triggered, although he asked Yoshida in a very unbelievable tone. Takahashi Makoto had a look on his face at this moment. But it showed a look of anticipation. This is indeed Stein's, Gates' choice. Drink ha 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 ha. Wait a minute, Chen, did I hear you correctly? Yoshida gritted his teeth and glared at Takahashi Makoto, wishing he could go up and bite the maniacally laughing middle-level cartoonist in front of him to death. You just said that the declaration of war you made at Mr. Fusion's house was just random nonsense. Yes, Makoto Takahashi blinked, smiled at the desperate Yoshida, and nodded to confirm. In other words, the reason why the situation has happened, and the culprit that caused all this, is just a random sentence said by a middle-class cartoonist? Chen, you can still laugh, seeing that Makoto Takahashi was still acting cute in a malicious manner. Yoshida wanted to die at this moment, so he raised his voice and roared at Makoto Takahashi. Hey Chen, do you know that it is because of your previous declaration of war that the Weekly Shonen Jump is now in huge trouble? Speaking of which, the editor is in trouble. Does this kind of thing have anything to do with me? Makoto Takahashi looked at Yoshida in disbelief. Did my disaster curse technique succeed? It shouldn't be too bad. Maybe. I remember that when I cast the disaster curse on the weekly editor, I designated you, my beloved cat, as the recipient of this disaster. But I didn't observe any change in the law of cause and effect at that time, and my companion is a cat. Aren't you still alive and well? How much do you want me to get into trouble? Yoshida looked at Makoto Takahashi's disappointed look, sighed helplessly, and decisively changed the topic back to the troubles on the weekly editor's side. Forget it, let's not talk about this now. That's right, an upright man should have a broad mind. If you care about these small things, you will die young. Makoto Takahashi, are you adding fuel to the fire? Now, my beloved cat, what trouble has the editorial department encountered? Could it be that you are the lackeys of the organization, who cannot stand the rule of the current editor-in-chief, and are planning to revolt and launch a rebellion? If that is the case, Qian you must not use slogans such as "Heaven is dead, Huang Tian shall stand," because that is a super curse that contains the powerful law of cause and effect. The current situation is, Yoshida has chosen to completely ignore Takahashi Makoto's talent for language that can deflect all kinds of business matters. Because you cartoonists suddenly came up with Super Smash Bros., several comics that were originally planned to be submitted for new serialization have now all withdrawn from the serialization meeting, resulting in a lack of comics to be serialized in the current weekly. Huh? There aren't enough newly serialized comics. Makoto Takahashi didn't believe Yoshida's words at all. My familiar cat, don't be kidding me. How massive are the new comics submitted to weekly magazines every week? As a responsibility editor, don't you still know? There are indeed a lot of comics submitted, but Chen. Yoshida looked at Makoto Takahashi and his eyes became a little unkind. Do you still remember your previous behavior of exchanging comic manuscripts? Among the comics you have read, our editorial department has already read 3 mangas by Fukuda-kun, Hiramaru-kun, and Ajuma-men-ha. Do you think our editorial department will read these 3 very interesting and potential manga manuscripts? Will you still agree to serialize some comics that can barely reach the serialization level? And even if those comics are serialized, once our Great Smash Brothers begins, those comics that have just started being serialized will be forced to have due to the impact, right, Makoto Takahashi said before Yoshida could finish. I just made up my own mind and picked up what Yoshida said. If this really happens, that would be a disaster for our weekly magazine Shonen Jump. Yoshida's tone was instantly filled with resentment when he thought that the person who caused this incident was a certain Chuyuni cartoonist in front of him. So now, what I want to know is, when will your new comic be submitted to the serialization meeting? As for the time, let's see, this kind of answer that deserves a beating. Takahashi Makoto's perfunctory attitude can be said to be quite obvious. Dear readers, please go to bed early, keep warm in the cold weather, that's all meow. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 496. Due to Takahashi Makoto's previous nonsense, everyone on the manga artist's side was in preparation for the upcoming brawl. My beloved cat, are you sure that the King of Black Flame and Lyozi are going to participate in this great brawl? Makoto Takahashi looked at the information that Yoshida had worked so hard to collect, and a look of confusion appeared on his face. Some looked heavy. Speaking of which, these two guys, aren't they still publishing monthly? Why do they still have time to participate in this great battle? Writing this, I hope readers will remember our domain name Taiwan Novel Network Rightward Arrow. I'm not very clear about Shizuka-kun, but I think Eiji Shinzuma will definitely participate. Regarding Takahashi Makoto's doubts, Yoshida said angrily, speaking of which, Makoto, are you sure you are qualified to do this? Are you talking about someone else? Don't forget that you are also serializing in a monthly magazine. And you are still serializing it in a monthly magazine. No, now I only need to complete the manga manuscript of White Rabbit Candy every month. The King of Black Flame should be responsible for this part of the recently serialized plot of the manga Railgun. Makoto Takahashi looking at Yoshida with some confusion. You don't even know about this kind of thing. By the way, are you really my editor-in-chief? Who is all this because of? Yoshida was very angry when his ability to work was questioned. Who the hell knows how you and your new wife Eiji divide the work? Besides, I'm already pretty good at this. That's right, Yujiro, the editor-in-chief of Eiji Niizuma, doesn't even know where Eiji Niizuma's manga is being serialized. Hey, you are really too irresponsible, aren't you? Makoto Takahashi showed a look of disgust on his face, complaining with some annoyance, don't think that your generation has the right to speak in the entire society. You can do whatever you want and send us young people around as you please. Look at this rotten world, look at this fallen society. It's all because you scum in high positions just sit in your high positions and yell nonsense all day long. But he doesn't do anything that is beneficial to mankind and the world, so the world is gradually heading towards destruction. It shouldn't be, not that exaggerated, right? Although I think Takahashi Makoto has some truth. Yoshida's face is full of black lines at the moment. He is just talking about the issue of comics, and it is necessary to rise to the level of national policy the height. Now, my beloved cat, do you dare to deny that this world is gradually decaying? Makoto Takahashi beat his chest and looked distressed. This world is because of people like you, my beloved cat. If there are too many people, it will gradually deteriorate, decay, and decay. When I was born, I was amazed by this beautiful world. But now, my heart is crying, sad, and painful. Hey, Cheng. Seeing Takahashi Makoto gradually enter the second grade state, Yoshida began to become uneasy. We are only talking about comics, do you understand? Any unexpected matters related to comic serialization are forbidden to be discussed now. Now, my beloved cat, have you ever thought about guiding confused humans? Have you ever thought about changing this world? Have you ever thought about saving this world? Makoto Takahashi ignored Yoshida's suggestion and instead repeated it again arrogantly. He issued the second declaration: if the blood in your body has not yet cooled down, and if there is still a trace of the great long-cherished wish of caring for the country and the people in your heart, then my beloved cat, Follow my steps and embark on the journey. The thorny road of the rebels, worship me as the god of the new world. I told you that now we are talking about manga serialization. Regarding Takahashi Makoto's arrogant middle school mode, Yoshida once again recalled the long-lost feeling of powerlessness. Seeing that Makoto Takahashi seemed to be interested in continuing his tirade, Yoshida decisively chose to change the subject. Okay, I know you have high aspirations, Makoto, but is it really okay to continue like this? Yujiro and I were both. I told you that I will come to your place with my new wife AG and my new comics later. The King of Black Flame, upon hearing this somewhat unexpected news, Takahashi Makoto was stunned for a moment, and then a look of anticipation appeared on his face. So that's it? The King of Black Flame has felt my determination to save the world. Is that why you traveled thousands of miles to come to our aid? Sure enough, the world is not hopeless yet. Yoshida's information is not very accurate. Because the people who came with Yuichiro were not just Shinzuma Eiji's classmates, but also the manga artist Shizuka who had always considered himself a disciple of manga artist Shoinkuma. The King of Black Flame and Ryuko, Makoto Takahashi looked at the two cartoonists who arrived at almost the same time, with an expectant look on his face, turned to Yoshida and smiled. Hey, my familiar cats, did you see that I am not the only one who wants to change this decadent and hopeless world? Ha 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 ha. Didn't Eiji Niizuma say he was coming to discuss the serialization of weekly comics with Makoto Takahashi? It's not like the saviors or sons of God in comics are just a group of cartoonists, saving the world or something like that is a bit too exaggerated, right? What are you talking about? Looking at Makoto Takahashi who was laughing wildly, Yujiro looked blank. He turned his doubtful eyes to Yoshida, his colleague in the weekly editorial department, and spoke in a voice that could not be heard by the three cartoonists who were communicating. He asked in a low voice, I'm talking about Yoshida-kun, what exactly is this? Yujiro, you definitely don't want to know what happened just now, believe me. Believe me, Yoshida, who was pale, pressed his hands firmly on Yujiro's shoulders and let out a sigh of relief. Fortunately you came in time. If you had come later, I don't know if I could have continued. Teacher Phoenix Academy, I heard from Teacher Fukuda that. Eiji Niizuma's tone was full of resentment. Why didn't you tell me about such an interesting thing? I also want to participate. Hey, King of Black Flame, haven't you already joined in? Makoto Takahashi seemed quite dissatisfied, staring at his new wife Eiji. Speaking of which, it's okay for you to participate in this great brawl, but there's a problem. Yes, King of Black Flame, don't forget that you are currently responsible for completing the comic manuscript for the monthly series of Railgun. A real man, a confident smile appeared on Niizuma Eiji's face. I have been drawing the manga manuscripts for the monthly series, and, Master Phoenix Academy, don't you also want to complete the manga manuscript for White Rabbit Candy? Since if I can do it, I can do it too. So what about the manga manuscript to be prepared for the new weekly series? Have you finished the Black Flame King? Since Eiji Niizuma has promised to insist on completing the manga manuscript of Railgun, Takahashi Makoto did not continue to make things difficult for him. Allies, you have to know that the opening battle of Super Smash Bros. Is at the serialization meeting. If you, Lord of Black Flame, do not prepare the comic draft for the new serialization, and it is just the opening battle, you may be forced to leave the show. Yo! It is indeed a new comic. Eiji Niizuma was not surprised, but took it for granted. The opening battle is at the serialization meeting. In other words, will everyone's comics be submitted to the serialization meeting at the same time? Well, not only can I have a fair competition with the Phoenix Academy teacher, but I can also compete with other people. Oh, this kind of thing is super interesting. It's true. Takahashi Siruo looked at his expectant new wife Eiji thoughtfully, and continued, I was a little confused before, it seems that the information about my beloved cat is not wrong. I also created a new comic. Master Phoenix Academy, do you want to read it? Eiji Shinzuma ignored Yujiro's call to stop him, grabbed the document bag, and handed a thick stack of manga manuscripts to Takahashi Makoto. Same treatment, same type, Phoenix Academy teacher, this time I can finally fight with you openly. Oh, hearing the implication of Eiji Shinzuma's words, Makoto Takahashi squinted and took over Eiji Shinzuma's manga manuscript, but Makoto Takahashi did not look through it in a hurry. Instead, he turned to Jinghi River and asked, "Hey, Ryua-san, you came to my realm today because you also want to participate in this great battle. Hey, Cheng. You guy, do you want to destroy the weekly?" Before Jinghi could say anything, Yashida immediately started shouting. Yashida has told Makoto Takahashi before that, including Makoto Takahashi, there are already 6 cartoonists, Ajuma Menha counts as 2, who are preparing to submit new comics at the weekly serialization conference at the same time, and the weekly magazine is because of this the so-called Great Battle Incident is in trouble. But now, Makoto Takahashi is still trying to drag Shizukawa, the cartoonist who is serializing in the monthly magazine, into this great battle? And, looking at the silent Shizukawa, Yashida is absolutely certain that this manga artist, who calls himself a disciple of manga artist Phoenix Academy Kumamoto, will definitely agree to Takahashi Makoto's devilish temptation. I suggest you join this great battle. Does Master hope that I will also participate in this big battle? Jinghi hesitated for a moment and asked hesitantly. Of course. If Ryuzi also joins, the fighting in this great brawl will be even more intense. Makoto Takahashi seemed to have noticed Shizu's hesitation, a smile appeared on his face, and he began to bewitch his former assistant. Speaking of which, Ryuzi, wouldn't you feel unwilling to miss such an opportunity? Isn't the opportunity to fight head-on with us what you have always longed for? Jinghi-kun, don't mess around with Aiken and the others. Yashida looked at the agitated Jinghi and immediately persuaded him, I don't want you to participate in such a weird event when you serialize Jean in the monthly magazine instead of creating a new series. This will distract you and even affect the current performance of the comic Jean. Although the motives of my beloved cat are not simple. Rather than saying that Makoto Takahashi rarely agreed with Yashida's statement this time, it would be better to say that he further deceived Shizuka. But this is indeed the case. Ryuzi, do you believe you have the ability to serialize weekly and monthly magazines at the same time? Regarding Takahashi Makoto's question, Jinghi hesitated. If you don't have this confidence, you can just focus on serializing in the monthly magazine and hone your skills and will. Takahashi Makoto didn't give Shizukawa too much time to think, and directly expressed his thoughts, but, if you have an unyielding will in your heart, if you have a burning fighting spirit in your soul, then, just stand up like a man and fight to your heart's content. Oh, Shizukawa-sensei, aren't you going to participate? Nizuma Eiji also joined the team of persuaders. Both of us are serializing comics in monthly magazines, and we are both submitting new comics to weekly serialization meetings. Maybe we will also serialize them in weekly magazines later. Under such extremely rare fair conditions, the chance to decide the winner in an upright manner, but it is rare. Teacher Shizukawa, is it really okay for you to give up such an opportunity so easily? Actually Shizukawa seemed to have finally made up his mind. He took out a stack of comic manuscripts from his backpack and handed them to Makoto Takahashi in front of everyone's surprised eyes. This is the new comic I came up with recently. Seeing Shizukawa's actions, Yashida wanted to kill Makoto Takahashi at this moment. New comics. Makoto Takahashi looked at the comic manuscripts of the 2 new comics in his hand, and after a moment of silence, he looked up at Eiji Nizuma and Shizukawa, with a playful smile on his face. Hey, King of Black Flame, Ryuko, I suddenly have an interesting idea at this moment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 497. Takahashi Makoto, who had originally planned to submit One Punch Man to the weekly serialization meeting, decided to postpone his action after learning that Shizukawa would also join the big brawl on the cartoonist side. Postpone, postpone, Yoshida was unhappy with the plan that Takahashi Makoto suddenly said. Is it because you want to wait for Shizukawa-kun to create a new comic? No, because I forgot to engrave the mind control technique in the previously completed comic manuscripts, my beloved cat. In order to add the technique, I must revise the comic manuscript again. Although Takahashi Makoto showed a look of regret, this excuse, normal people would not believe it, right? Even though Makoto Takahashi told Yoshida that the reason for delaying the submission of the One Punch Man comic was because he did not have time to implant the rune array that could affect the human spirit in the revised comic, but Yoshida had long seen through Makoto Takahashi's excuse, and believed that the reason why Makoto Takahashi delayed the submission of the comic for 2 weeks was entirely to wait for Jinghi River. Create a comic within 2 weeks, and complete the first chapter of the comic. Aiken, the conditions you put forward, are you deliberately delaying? You must be deliberately delaying time, right? When Yoshida heard Makoto Takahashi's request to Jinghi River, his first reaction was that Makoto Takahashi was deliberately making things difficult for Jinghi River. Then after a little thought, Yoshida looked at Makoto Takahashi with an unfriendly look, because Yoshida felt that Makoto Takahashi was deliberately delaying time. You know, for ordinary cartoonists, let alone whether they can have inspiration for new comics in just 2 weeks, just turning the plot they have come up with into a comic is already quite difficult. Takahashi Makoto proposed this condition that sounds extremely difficult. Is this really to get Shizukawa to participate in the Super Smash Bros., rather than a certain second-year cartoonist's devilish rejection? However, Shizukawa actually accepted Takahashi Makoto's condition with full confidence. And if I don't create a new comic and complete the first chapter of the comic in 2 weeks? Shizukawa said this in front of the 2 cartoonists and the 2 responsible editors, although Shizukawa didn't say what would happen if he didn't do it, but facing such harsh conditions, he still has this courage. Everything is enough. 2 weeks passed quickly. During this period, Takahashi Makoto didn't show off his comic One Punch Man everywhere as before. Instead, he tried his best to complete the monthly serialized comic manuscript and modify the comic manuscript of One Punch Man. Although there are still 3 days before the next serialization meeting, today is the deadline for submitting new serializations for both the cartoonist and the editor. Therefore, Yoshida came to Takahashi Makoto early in the morning to collect the comics of One Punch Man. The reason why Yoshida chose Takahashi Makoto first was largely because of the increasingly strong ominous premonition in his heart recently. Compared with the little sea otter who may enter the escape mode at any time and hide from XZ to evade the obligations of a cartoonist, Takahashi Makoto is completely on a different level in terms of the severity of the problems he caused and the degree of cruelty after causing the problems, and more importantly, for the comic One Punch Man, after observing the original version of the magic, Yoshida also wanted to see the revised version of the comics as soon as possible. Therefore, Yoshida came to Takahashi Makoto first. In addition to wanting to erase the uneasiness in his heart, the main purpose was to observe the revised version of the One Punch Man comics in advance. However, Yoshida was still a step too late. "Oh, Yoshida-san, you are finally here." Uncle Ding Ding showed a helpless look on his face after seeing Yoshida, but he still tried to put on a kind smile. "Sure enough, Cheng told me before that you would show up soon." "Eh? Cheng is not here." Looking at the assistant Ding Ding who has been wandering at the door of Takahashi Makoto's house, Yoshida suddenly felt like eating a pill. "Also, what did you say just now, mean?" "Cheng told me that I don't have to work today. I will tell you after you come, Yoshida." Seeing Yoshida's increasingly gloomy expression, Uncle Ding Ding's voice became lower and lower. under Yoshida's eyes that said, "If you don't say it again, I will torture you to death." Uncle Ding Ding seemed to give up on himself and raised his voice to convey Takahashi Makoto's original words. "My beloved cat, in order to prevent the organization from sending you to interfere with my plan, I deliberately left Ding Ding Ji-san to delay time. When you hear this, I have already embarked on the road to becoming a god. All this is the choice of Steins Gate." "Ha ha 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 ha," that's what Cheng said. "That guy Cheng." Yoshida did not get angry as Uncle Ding Ding expected, but the amazing resentment in his body still made Uncle Ding Ding retreat again and again. "Where is he? Where did Cheng go now?" I don't know." Uncle Ding Ding looked at Yoshida, who had a somewhat ferocious face, and decisively stepped back a little, and replied carefully, "But Yoshida-san, Cheng just left not long ago, and, when I saw Cheng leave, he also took the comic manuscript of One Punch Man." Cheng brought the manga manuscript of One Punch Man. Although the information was sparse, it still gave Yoshida a basis for speculation on Takahashi Makoto's actions. Cheng actually brought the manuscript of the new comic today? Cheng's purpose, couldn't it be the idea he mentioned before? Takahashi Makoto had told his new wife Eiji and Shizuka before that he had an interesting idea. However, neither Yujiro nor Yoshida had time to collect satisfactory information about the specific content within 2 weeks. But Yoshida knows that Makoto Takahashi's so-called interesting thoughts are definitely not normal things, judging from the character of a middle-class cartoonist who regards the evil taste of ghosts and animals as a source of pleasure. The so-called interesting, it is absolutely equivalent to an idea that deceives people. And the person being cheated, if it wasn't the editorial department of the weekly, it would be himself. So, in order to prevent himself from being tricked, and to stop Makoto Takahashi from killing the weekly editorial department, Yoshida, the vicious editor of the weekly editorial department and the editor-in-chief of a certain middle-class cartoonist, embarked on a journey to find a certain middle-class cartoonist. Wars and lies, this is how humans communicate today. In order to hide lies, humans have to launch wars. In order to cover up wars, humans have to use lies. And all of this is the reason for the degeneration of this society, and it is proof that the world is decaying. Gentlemen, in order to guide humans who are gradually losing trust, in order to save this decadent and fallen world, it is time to launch a revolution. Makoto Takahashi, who was listed as the leader of the disturbance by Yoshida, was wearing white at the moment. The big coat, facing the gathered cartoonists, made a sacred and fanatical declaration. "This is exactly the purpose of calling you all together today." Except for Eiji Nyaizuma, who had a look of anticipation on his face, several other people on the manga artist's side had a completely unbearable feeling on their faces, because the location chosen by Makoto Takahashi was the weekly Shounen Junka conference room in the editorial department. The cartoonists sitting in the conference room can completely feel the strange looks of the onlookers outside. Although the sound insulation effect of the conference room is very good, some people such as Little Sea Otter and Aiken Mu Menjai are relatively thin-skinned. The cartoonists seem to be able to hear all the comments from the onlookers outside. "Stop saying these useless words, Cheng." In response to Takahashi Makoto's Chuyunio-like speech, the silver-haired boy Fukuda intervened forcefully with a look of displeasure on his face. "By the way, isn't today the deadline for new comics to be submitted to the serialization meeting? So why did you choose today to summon us here, Cheng?" "So, it's to guide mankind and save the world." A certain second-grade cartoonist rarely showed any displeasure at having his declaration interrupted. "It's just this explanation that makes it more exciting, right?" "Huh? Guide humanity? Save the world? Can a cartoonist still have such cruel abilities? Trust between humans is quite fragile and difficult to maintain." Makoto Takahashi's rhythm was not affected by the silver-haired brother Fukuda. Instead, he continued the topic he had just left unfinished. "It is precisely because of this, the way of communication between humans will be like today, with only war and lies left. I say Cheng, Hurry up and get to the main topic of today. Mr. Huang Mao Glasses pushed up his glasses helplessly and tapped the comic manuscript on the table with his fingers. You specially asked us to complete the comic with the new book today. What exactly do you want to do when you come here with the comic manuscript? Tisk, I really don't have the patience. He was interrupted again mid-sentence. Makoto Takahashi spread his hands helplessly. Originally, I wanted to tell you that what we are going to do later will have a negative impact on the entire human race and the world. How important is it? Well, in that case, let's talk about the righteousness later. Let's get to the point now. About my new comic. Seeing that everyone's attention was focused on him, Takahashi Makoto nodded with satisfaction, picked up his revised One Punch Man comic manuscript from the table, and said after the cartoonist gestured to everyone, he continued, except for the King of Black Flame, it seems that everyone has only read the original version of the comic manuscript, right? HN, is the comic manuscript in your hand, revised? Lan Dai's face showed a true look on his face, and he said to his good friend next to him, I'm just talking about that guy HN, for this time during the serialization meeting, the manga manuscript will definitely be revised. And among the gentlemen here, except for the King of Black Flame and Lyoze, I have read all your new comics. Takahashi Makoto looked at Lan Dai with some dissatisfaction, and continued to speak calmly. He said in a tone of voice, confirm again. This time the Super Smash Brothers on the cartoonist side will start from the serialization meeting, you all know it, right? Yes, everyone on the manga side nodded in confirmation, except Eiji, the new wife. All looked at Makoto Takahashi with doubtful eyes, waiting for the next step. In order for human beings to regain trust among each other, and to save this decadent society, I, the arrogant manga artist Hohoin Kuma, hereby propose that this great battle, let us use the most upright way. Let's do it. Makoto Takahashi's eyes flashed with enthusiasm, and he shouted to all the cartoonists, let's exchange and observe each other's new comic manuscripts before submitting the new series. It's for the righteousness of restoring trust between people. But, after looking at each other, Yachin Mumenjai and his good friend wanted to refute immediately, but before they could say anything, they were interrupted by Takahashi Makoto. This is definitely not the behavior of a middle school cartoonist who interrupted a blue-headed classmate before taking revenge. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated in 100 battles. Takahashi Makoto glanced at the people on the cartoonist side, with a solemn look on his face. Since we want to fight openly, then don't hide anything, don't deceive, be honest, and rebuild trust between people. I know what you are worried about. Looking at the expressions of the people on the cartoonist side, Takahashi Makoto did not explain too much, but said excitedly, but as a cartoonist, have you forgotten what a cartoonist is? Believe in yourself, believe in your comics, even if you know the opponent's plot, you can still be a cartoonist. The story is very exciting, but I will not retreat because of it. Instead, I will muster up the courage and fight with all my strength. Occasionally gaining an advantage will not make me complacent, because the kingship is not eternal. Failure for a while will not make me depressed, because failure is the mother of success. Regardless of victory or defeat, you should have enough confidence in your comics. This is a real cartoonist. Recently, I am quite busy at the end of the year, and the recent updates are not very good, but I will try to add more words, ha 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 ha. Then, as I said before, please rest early, readers, and keep warm in cold weather. That's all, meow. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 498. After the furious declaration of a certain second-grade cartoonist ended, everyone on the cartoonist side was stunned for a long time before they realized what the purpose of Makoto Takahashi's gathering of everyone was today. Chang, what do you mean? Shall we exchange observations on our new comics before submitting them to the serialization meeting? Oh, this development is super interesting. It's worthy of being said by a teacher from the Phoenix Academy. Regarding Makoto Takahashi's proposal, everyone on the cartoonist side had different reactions, but the confusion was only for a moment. Everyone on the cartoonist side quickly reached a consensus, approved the proposal of a certain second-grade cartoonist, and decided to submit the new comic before going to the serialization meeting, exchange, and observe each other's completed manga manuscripts. There are no special requirements for the order of observation. Makoto Takahashi took out the revised One Punch Man comic manuscript from his white coat, put it neatly on the table, and continued to explain to the cartoonist side. By the way, this is my latest revised comic draft. Although compared with the comic drafts that you have observed before, there are not many changes in the plot and characters of the comic, but what about the painting style? It's changed a lot. According to my cat's words, the revised manga is much more observable than the original version you saw before. Although Makoto Takahashi specifically emphasized that his comic One Punch Man has been modified in terms of painting style, but several cartoonists on the cartoonist side have no previous interest in the comics they have observed, so something interesting happened. Several cartoonists on the cartoonist side seem to have deliberately ignored the efforts of a middle-class cartoonist to introduce them when they were exchanging cartoon manuscripts for observation. The comic chosen by Eiji Nyaizuma is written by Ajuma Menha, whom he has always been interested in. The comic chosen by the silver-haired brother Fukuda is written by the little sea otter who is the oldest but most bullied by the cartoonist. At this moment, I once again feel the malice of the whole world towards me. I am desperate. Now I am completely desperate for the whole world. Looking at the cartoonist, several people beside him have begun to exchange observation cartoon manuscripts, and his own One Punch Man was still neatly placed on the table and no one cared about it. Makoto Takahashi sighed helplessly. In order to cover up the embarrassing situation at the moment, he took out his mobile phone and entered the mysterious call mode that he had not seen for a long time. The specific situation is basically like this: man, I can still hold on for a while. If that happens, please tell which Rina for me and tell her that I love her. Well, just so be it, mate. El Psychongru. Teacher, can your revised manga draft be inspected by me? After watching Takahashi Makoto end the call with no target at all, Jinghe came to Takahashi Makoto holding his manga draft. Proposed an invitation to comic manuscript exchange to Makoto Takahashi. Although he is prohibited from calling Takahashi Makoto using terms such as teacher and master, the small problem of title cannot stop the paranoid disciple Shizuka. Since common titles are banned, then use partial or ancient titles. Oh, Ryoko, you are indeed the most discerning. Makoto Takahashi, who had been extremely melancholy and lonely just now, after hearing the exchange application sent by Jinghe River, a happy and joyful look immediately appeared on his face. Even they all ignored the weird name Jinghe used for himself. But having said that, you were able to create a new comic and complete the first chapter in 2 weeks. It's really amazing. It's not a very big thing, because I know. Jinghe stared at Takahashi Makoto with eyes full of admiration, and said with conviction, but if it is a master craftsman creation, I'm afraid 1 week is enough to complete a new comic and finish the first chapter. A week? Tisk, I don't remember that I have such a cruel ability. Makoto Takahashi pointed to the One Punch Man comic manuscript on the table, with a wicked smile on his face. Of course, if I use the original print style, let alone the content of the first episode, I won't have any pressure to finish 5 episodes in 1 week. If it's that style of painting, haha. Thinking of the magical comic manuscript he had observed before, Jinghe forced an awkward smile on his face and used the topic change skill stiffly. Master, please take a look at the new comic I have completed in the past 2 weeks. I have been looking forward to this day since the completion of this comic, because I hope that you, Master, will be the first to see this. A cartoonist. Damn it, after just turning over the first page of the comic, Makoto Takahashi looked at the familiar character appearing in the comic and immediately uttered a curse word. This character is actually, wait, that means this comic is, tisk. Master, do you know that this comic is actually inspired by? Jinghe looked at Makoto Takahashi's surprised look, touched his nose awkwardly, and whispered in an embarrassed voice, "It comes from my recollection of the time when I was your assistant." "So, Ruko, did you create this comic?" Makoto Takahashi's tone was full of surprise and weirdness, pointing to a strange character in the comic, and asked with some uncertainty, "Now, Ryuze, according to your explanation just now, in your memories, am I this image?" Didn't Master Takashi say before that although comic characters are derived from reality, in order to show the best effect, they should be a little exaggerated? Shizugawa looked at Makoto Takahashi timidly and asked uneasily, "Master, are you dissatisfied with the image I created of you in the comics?" "Wait a minute, this is not a question of dissatisfaction." Makoto Takahashi put down the manga manuscript and looked at Jinghe seriously. After pondering for a moment, he slowly said, "Compared with the manga, this big guy, as a quonky cartoonist, I am far behind, in every aspect." "Ryuze, you actually compare me to that big guy?" Hey, don't be kidding me." "Yeah, this will shorten your life." "Eh? Master, don't you want to continue reading?" Watching Takahashi-chan put down the comic manuscript and stop observing after he finished speaking, Jinghe was a little surprised at first, and then fell into despair. "Is it because, sure enough, I still can't do it now?" "Ryuze, this comic is actually not as bad as you think. Originally, I thought that if I serialized it in a monthly magazine and created a new comic manuscript in just 2 weeks, I would be recognized by you, Master." Jinghe, who had completely fallen into the mode of self-pity, seemed to don't give Makoto Takahashi a chance to speak at all. "But now it seems that I still thought too simplistically." "No. That, I said. Master, I have decided." Jinghe raised his head and looked at Makoto Takahashi, his face showing unprecedented seriousness. "After the serialization of Jean in the monthly magazine ends, I will stop continuing to serialize it in the monthly magazine, and then I will study hard with you as an assistant again." "So, Master. So, don't deny yourself so quickly, Ryuko." Speaking of Takahashi Makoto, can you now understand Yoshida's feelings when he talks to you? Of course, fortunately, a certain middle-level cartoonist is not as weak as a certain responsible editor. Makoto Takahashi, who has long grasped the truth that the strong will win, quickly regained the right to speak. "The reason why I didn't continue reading is not because your comics are unsightly. If your comics are really as unsightly as you think, I will definitely tell you directly and drag you back to work. I will let you practice in seclusion for another 300 to 500 years. But Master, according to the mantra of my familiar cat, it is, you listen to me first." Makoto Takahashi picked up Shizuohi's new comic. His face was quite strange, and after being silent for a long time, he spoke in an uncertain tone. Said, "The reason why I stopped observing the manga manuscript is because I discovered 2 very special things. Ahem, of course, it's not because I was affected by the spell you engraved in the manga, Ryuze, it's just." "Just what?" Jinghe asked with some worry. "Are there unreasonable settings in the comic? Or is the comic not as exciting as you imagined, Master, and are you disappointed? Or is this comic very being childish is boring?" "Tisk, you're asking questions like a string of questions, Ruko, you really have an incredible skill." After Makoto Takahashi sighed a little feebly, he was not as appetizing as he was with Yoshida. "Hey, Ryuko, do you remember when you created the comic Jean? To be precise, after you completed the first chapter of Jean, what did I do at that time?" "Master, you were very excited at the time and asked me a lot of strange questions. Jing He directly exposed the dark history of Takahashi Makoto at that time. However, after seeing Takahashi Makoto's expression becoming more and more gloomy, after that, he decisively stopped talking and began to frown and enter memory mode. But, speaking of classmate Jing He, are you sure that your previous attributes were really just an inarticulate three wuss? So what's going on with this proper natural stupidity attribute now? Do humans, like Pokemon, have hidden characteristics? Hey, have you forgotten it? Makoto Takahashi looked at Jing He and frowned in thought, with a devilish smile on his face. Then, in order to make you remember what happened that day, let me do it again today, son. Now is the time to witness the miracle. After Makoto Takahashi finished speaking, he took out a piece of manuscript paper from his white coat, leaned over the table in the conference room, started writing urgently, and when Shizuka saw this scene, his whole body trembled. A look of surprise appeared on his face. Could it be that, what Master is writing at this moment, is the follow-up content of my comic? After hesitating again and again, Jing He walked to Takahashi Makoto and silently observed what Takahashi Makoto had written. After just observing for a moment, Jing He was completely shocked. It's really the same as that day. Although it's a bit unbelievable, I didn't expect that the master and craftsman can really do it. Should I say that he is worthy of being a master and craftsman? Swish. I've written here, should be enough, right? If I continue, it might interfere with your comic creation, Ryoko. Takahashi Makoto turned his head and looked at the somewhat dazed Jing He River, squinting his eyes and smiled. So Ryoko, you understand why I didn't continue observing just now. Of course, this is just one of the reasons. It's actually similar to the plot I imagined. Jing He River's eyes looking at Takahashi Makoto have completely changed. If Jing He River's eyes were filled with admiration and worship before, then now it has completely sublimated into the fanaticism of believers for God. Then Master, another reason is. As for the other reason, alas, as if Jing He River had touched some past events, Takahashi Makoto showed a helpless look on his face. After a long sigh, he complained indignantly, that's because I felt it again, the malice from the world. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 499. The cartoonist side worked hard for a long time to complete the work, but when conducting the exchange observation, it only took a short time to observe the comics. After reading the content of the first chapter of the comics, it took less than half an hour. Sure enough, the time required to complete the content of a comic and the time to observe a comic are not equal at all. No. This behavior actually violates the great truth of equivalent exchange. Takahashi Makoto read Jing He River's new comics very carefully. It's not that a certain middle school cartoonist deliberately found fault, or because the comic he wanted to draw was drawn by someone else in advance and held prejudice. Takahashi Makoto read it very carefully and seriously just to confirm whether Jing He River's new comic is the same as the original in his memory. The result is really the same as the original. Among the cartoonists who exchanged and observed the comics, Takahashi Makoto was the last cartoonist to observe other people's comics, and he was also the last one to finish reading the comics. What is this? The self-awakening of the world's will? Or is it the self-correction of Gaia Loli? Or is it actually derived from? Master, is there anything wrong with my comic manuscript? After hearing Takahashi Makoto's resentful mumbling, Jing He River, who put down the One Punch Man comic manuscript, asked uneasily, although I couldn't hear what you said just now, but I can feel the resentment in you that breaks through the sky. Tisk, have you been discovered again? It seems that my practice is not enough. Jing He River's question made Takahashi Makoto get rid of the Chuyunibu mode. Seeing Jing He Liu's uneasy look, Takahashi Makoto sighed helplessly and slowly explained to Jing He Liu, no. Actually, all this has nothing to do with your comics. I'm just complaining about the hostility of the world towards me. Well, that's all. Then master, about the comics of my new comics. Although Takahashi Makoto repeatedly emphasized that he had no dissatisfaction with this new comic, Jinghee Liu could still hear the resentment in the tone of a certain middle school cartoonist every time he sighed. Therefore, Jinghee Liu, who was simple-minded and full of fanatical admiration for Takahashi Makoto, naturally misunderstood the various expressions of a certain middle school cartoonist as master is quite dissatisfied with my comics but can't say it directly, which is full of goodwill cover-up. It's a very interesting comic. This is not perfunctory or false flattery, but Takahashi Makoto's sigh from the heart. Speaking of being able to create such an interesting comic in 2 weeks, Ryoko, you should be a little more confident. Is that so? But. The smile on Shizukawa's face seemed a little unnatural. Under the curious gaze of Takahashi Makoto, Shizukawa was silent for a while, and then whispered in a voice full of apology and guilt, in fact, some of the plot settings of this comic have not been drawn yet, but in fact, I created it with reference to your new comic One Punch Man. Huh? Did I hear it wrong? Did you refer to the comic One Punch Man during the creation of this new comic? Takahashi Makoto said that he was really scared by Shizukawa's words. After referring to the magical style of One Punch Man, Shizukawa was able to draw this comic. Takahashi Makoto looked at Shizukawa with hostility, and asked uncertainly, first, the monthly comic genre, and then this comic. Hey, Ryoko, are you sure you are not the agent of this world, or the embodiment of Gaia Loli's will? Of course not, I knew it would develop like this, Shizukawa denied it with a wry smile. So when you were a kid, did you ever hit your head, or fall off a cliff and survive but lose your memory? Seeing Jinghee River's confused look, Takahashi Makoto further explained, in the time since you've lived to this age, have there been any special things that caused you to have memory interruptions? No, looking at the burning expectation in Takahashi Makoto's eyes, Jinghee River expressed that he was under a lot of pressure. Is that so, Tisk? Takahashi Makoto, who was full of expectations just now, lost his enthusiasm in an instant, and muttered to himself with some melancholy, now I can confirm that you, Ryoko, are not from the same place as me. Of course, your identity as an agent needs further verification. After Takahashi Makoto and Jinghee River finished communicating, the next round of cartoonist side cartoon manuscripts exchange observation also ended. The cartoon that Yashiro Mumenjai observed this time was the one that Jinghee River completed in 2 weeks, and it made Takahashi Makoto feel the malice of the world. Just by observing the opening of the comic, the good friends Yachin Mumenjai quickly immersed themselves in the setting of the opening of the comic. This octopus-like creature is the criminal who blew up the moon? He also offered to teach as a teacher, and is also the target of assassination by students. The class composed of poor students has become the key to saving the Earth, the student assassin. Successfully killing this octopus-like teacher will be rewarded with 10 billion. Carrying out assassinations while attending class, integrating the life of a killer into campus life, this setting looks quite interesting. Oh, is this Mr. Shizukawa's new comic? It's really interesting, because he had already read the revised version of One Punch Man. Eiji Niizuma did not observe it again, but quietly squeezed into Aiken beside Mumenjai, observe the new comics of Jinghee River with a good group of gay friends. Ahahaha, this teacher is very interesting regardless of his appearance and personality. Shizukawa completed the new comic in 2 weeks. Like the comic genre, it is also very familiar to Makoto Takahashi. It tells the story of a great teacher who uses his life to teach. That's right, Shizukawa's new comic is Assassination Classroom. Do you understand now, Ruko? Compared to Kyajo Mumenha and Shinzuma Eiji, Takahashi Makoto was not anxiously observing the manga manuscript in his hand. Instead, he said to Shizukawa, who had also not started observing the manga manuscript, look carefully at the expressions of those humans. If the comics weren't exciting enough, do you think they would still be yelling at the various settings in the comics like this? If your new work is really what you think, if it's so ugly, will it still fascinate them so much? No. Do you know why I say that the manga Assassination is excellent? Makoto Takahashi patted his chest lightly and boasted to Jing Hehe without hesitation, that's because I feel, Ruko, you have great comic love. Master, The simple classmate Jing He didn't consider the possibility that Takahashi Makoto's words just now were nonsense. After lowering his head and pondering for a moment, Jing He finally showed a natural smile on his face. No. Thank you, Master Craftsman. After seeing Shizuo, he lowered his head to observe the manga manuscript of the silver-haired brother Fukuda. Takahashi Makoto naturally did not say anything more. Instead, he glanced at the little sea otter who was carefully observing the manga manuscript of One Punch Man and picked up the comic in front of me. Is ready to enter observer mode. Oh! It's the new manga of the Lord of Black Flame. This is the new manga I'm most looking forward to. What Makoto Takahashi wants to observe this time is the new manga of Eiji Arizuma. If Lord of the Black Flame, your new manga, the comics are not exciting enough, so you won't have the chance to intervene in this great battle. If this really happens, Lord of Black Flame, you should just concentrate on completing the monthly serialization of Railgun. Hey, I know what I'm saying. But Teacher Phoenix Institute, I'm quite confident about this new manga. And Eiji, the new wife who was huddled with Ajumenha to observe the Shizugawa manga, after hearing what Makoto Takahashi said, a confident look appeared on his face, and he invited Makoto Takahashi to a duel without any hesitation or timidity. Same theme, same type, just like what the Phoenix Academy teacher said before, let's have an unusual and fair duel this time. Humph. It's just what I want. Makoto Takahashi picked up Eiji Naizuma's manga manuscript, glanced at Shizuo River, and said angrily to Eiji Naizuma, after feeling the malice from the world many times, at this moment, I have nothing to fear. At that time, Rika-chan and her senior also spoke similar lines so boldly, but the result was that the group was destroyed and their heads were bitten off. So, speaking of Takahashi Seina, you who say such words now, have you forgotten something important? This is difficult, unbelievable. After just observing the opening chapter of the comic, Takahashi Makoto's body began to tremble non-stop, and then he raised his head and looked at Eiji, the new wife, with horrified eyes. After a brief moment of silent contemplation, a certain middle-level cartoonist completely broke out. Lord of Black Flame, this comic of yours, how can it be edited? How could it be this comic? It's a lie, this is definitely a lie. Why is the new comic of Lord of Black Flame this one? Hey, Chen, I'm just reading a comic, do you need to be so excited? For Takahashi Makoto, who has fallen into a panic state, the silver-haired guy who is carefully observing Ajumenha's soul of the game, immediately he complained dissatisfiedly, besides, just now, didn't you say you were looking forward to Eiji Naizuma's new manga? Why are you showing such a frightened expression now? Ignoring the silver-haired boy's provocation, Takahashi Makoto began to quickly look through the manga manuscripts in his hand. As time passed, the unread manga manuscripts in Takahashi Makoto's hands became less and less. In contrast, Takahashi Makoto's face became increasingly ugly. This comic in the hands of Makoto Takahashi, just as Eiji Naizuma said, this comic is very similar to One Punch Man in terms of the choice of subject matter and the setting of the background. It also tells the story of heroes protecting justice. The story of destroying evil also belongs to the hot-blooded battle comics. However, why this comic? Why is it My Hero Academia, a comic with a passionate hero theme? Is it because the King of Black Flame was responsible for completing the magic forbidden part of Railgun before and had too frequent contact with me, so he felt Gaia Lolis will like Ryako and became the leader of this world? Agent, Makoto Takahashi put down the manga manuscript in his hand and turned to look at the cartoonists who were observing the manga manuscript, with a helpless smile on his face. This great battle is really, wait. The reason why the current situation is happening may not be accidental. Could it be that this is the true manifestation of the world's malice? Well, the weather is cold, dear readers, please go to bed early. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 500. While everyone on the cartoonist's side was happily carrying out the manga manuscript exchange and observation operation, a certain editor who had been looking for Makoto Takahashi received a call from his colleague cartoonist Shoin Kuma summoned a group of cartoonists after reporting the conspiracy in the special conference room where cartoonists were received in the editorial department. He immediately rushed back to the editorial base from the outside. Yoshida, who had just returned to the editorial base, had not had time to say hello to his colleagues and express his gratitude for the information provided, when he saw a figure in a white coat from outside the conference room window, looking at a certain middle school student. The second cartoonist opened and closed his mouth, as if he was spouting extremely cruel Chuyuni remarks. Yoshida wanted to kick open the door of the conference room, drag Takahashi Makoto out and shoot him for 5 minutes. Of course, let's not talk about whether Yoshida has the force to subdue Takahashi Makoto. If Yoshida really does this, he may be directly invited by the editor-in-chief of Bottle to have tea and discuss his future career. Future life, and compensation for damaged office supplies. The remaining reason restrained a certain editor in charge, so that Yoshida was not overwhelmed by anger. Under the gaze of his colleagues on the editorial side, Yoshida tried his best to suppress his anger and dissatisfaction with a certain middle-class cartoonist, and pushed open the closed door of the conference room and walked in. What? It turns out it's you, my familiar cat. After Makoto Takahashi looked up at Yoshida, he continued to look down at the manga manuscript in his hand and said in a casual tone, "Originally, I was planning to do it." After a while, the person who used the ultra-remote summoning technique said to you, "I didn't expect you to be so conscious." Sure enough, all this is the choice of Destiny Gate. Hey, Chen, summoning magic or something, don't forget, I'm not a summoned beast, but your editor in charge. It was clear that he looked like he was about to explode with anger before, but after Yoshida complained, everyone on the cartoonist side can see that the anger level of a certain editor has dropped significantly. Sure enough, Yoshida is a creature from the planet that will kill you if you don't complain. Although I'm very curious about what you want from me, Chen, but now shouldn't be the time to talk about this, right? What I want to ask you, Chen, is... Loved me, Makoto Takahashi replied subconsciously, causing Yoshida to directly enter the dead fish eyes and speechless state. Yoshida took a deep breath, walked quickly to Takahashi Makoto, and slammed the table. That's not what I want to ask. Chen, what do you want to do by gathering everyone here? Humph, this kind of thing, haven't you seen it yet? Makoto Takahashi finally put down the manga manuscript and raised his head to look at Yoshida. We have gathered everyone from the manga artist's side here, so naturally we are going to initiating a rebellion against the new commander. We have you. Hey, Chen, can you please stop joking? Yoshida, who knew that a certain second-grade cartoonist was unreliable, quickly stepped forward and covered Takahashi as soon as he sensed something was wrong. Cheng's mouth prevented some things that must not be said on this occasion from being uttered by a certain middle-class cartoonist, and at the same time, he did not forget to warn in a low voice, there are certain things and words that must not be said here now. Hey! My beloved cat, you are so cowardly. You don't have the ambition of Prince and General Xiangning has the kind, you don't have the fighting spirit to fight to the end, and you don't have the consciousness to defeat the superior. Makoto Takahashi is not only very happy he easily got rid of Yoshida's seal on him, and he didn't forget to ridicule a certain editor in charge. No wonder you, my cat, have gone through so many years of training and are still just an editor in charge. I'm just an editor in charge. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that I haven't improved at all over the years. Yoshida, your performance at this moment, could it be that Takahashi Makoto's words hit a sore point? Yoshida, who had no intention of continuing to communicate with Makoto Takahashi, turned to look at the other cartoonists who were watching. By the way, all of you, were all summoned here by Makoto? What did Makoto tell you? As the most devout believers and the most fanatical disciples, Little Sea Otter and Jinghe River are die-hard loyalists of Makoto Takahashi, and Eiji, the new wife, not only formed an alliance with Makoto Takahashi, but also made an appointment with Makoto Takahashi not long ago. Contest. As for the silver-haired boy Fukuda, a cartoonist who dares to use violence to intimidate his own editor, how can Yoshida, who is not very friendly to questions, look good? Cheng didn't tell us anything before coming here. In the end, it was the cartoonist's side best friend who answered Yoshida's question. Just now we just exchanged and observed the new manga drafts we completed, and then Mr. Yoshida, you are here. Exchange and observe the newly completed manga manuscript? You guys. Are you guys idiots? I originally wanted to complain like this, but after seeing the very calm look of everyone on the cartoonist's side, Yoshida still mocked this. After swallowing all the words, he turned his head and stared at Takahashi Makoto. So Cheng, what is your next plan? My next plan is, do you think I will be like a fool and tell you directly about the minions of this organization? Humph. My cat, you are too sweet. Takahashi Makoto folded his hands, showing a disdainful smile on his face, and sighed to Yoshida in a malicious tone. Actually, it's not impossible to want to know my next plan, but my cat, I remember that you are just an editor in charge, right? Just an editor in charge. It seems that you don't have a high voice in the weekly editorial side. Ah Cheng, don't forget, I am your editor in charge. Just now, Takahashi Makoto clearly said that he was not qualified, so this also means, Yoshida's face became a little ugly, frowned and said coldly, Ah Cheng, you want to bypass the editor in charge? The editor, should I discuss it directly with the editor-in-chief? Tisk, my beloved cat, don't look abandoned. Makoto Takahashi seemed to have seen through Yoshida's misunderstanding. After shaking his head with a chuckle, he raised the comic manuscript in his hand, regarding the relevant matters of the new comic series of the cartoonists. Hey, my beloved cat, are you sure you have enough decision-making power? Shit. After a brief silence, Yoshida seemed to have understood what Makoto Takahashi was thinking, and a horrified expression immediately appeared on his face. Ah Cheng, you don't want to. Oh my beloved cat, it seems that you have guessed it, Makoto Takahashi complained with a somewhat regretful tone, and did not forget to warn Yoshida. Although there is no reward for guessing it, but if you, my cat, reveal it casually, you will definitely be punished. Such a crazy thing, the editor-in-chief will never agree to it. This is just your wishful thinking, my cat, and my cat, you have no decision-making power. What is the best choice now? I believe I don't need to say more, right? But now the editor-in-chief. Where is the new commander now? Well, he should be in the office on the 12th floor, observing the various data tables of the previous issue of the weekly. Then I will, wait. Why do you know this kind of thing, Cheng? And you know it in such detail? Humph, the reason is very simple, my cat, because I am the crazy manga artist Hao Winkuma. In the end, the conversation between a certain Chuyunibu manga artist and a responsible editor ended with Yoshida's defeat and escape to seek the editor-in-chief's help. As the winner, Makoto Takahashi, after watching Yoshida enter the elevator, turned his head and looked at the manga artist's side who had been watching. Yoshi, since the intruder who disturbed the situation has been successfully sent away, then next. Makoto Takahashi glanced at the manga artist's side, and a sinister smile appeared on his face. What I want to tell you, is the real core of this big brawl. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 501. Although we know that a certain middle-class cartoonist likes to say some very unreliable things in formal occasions, everyone around the cartoonist does not deny that every time when discussing key issues, a certain person who seems quite unreliable will a second-grade cartoonist, but he can always be a partner who can be trusted to be trusted. Just like this time. Everyone, before the start of the Super Smash Bros. Opener, we still need to solve a problem that has been ignored but has to be faced. Makoto Takahashi watched Yoshida embark on the journey of searching for the bottle editor's passion after the trip. He said seriously to the cartoonist side, "That's the problem that the new serial submitted by you will cause at the serialization conference." It turns out it's just this kind of thing, but, looking at Makoto Takahashi's serious look, I thought he would say something outrageous. Hearing that Makoto Takahashi just mentioned the serialization-related matters again, the silver-haired boy Fukuda immediately curled his lips in dissatisfaction. According to what Cheng said before, didn't the battle between comics begin with serialization? Regarding this, I think everyone in the Fukuda group has already it very clearly. Cheng, there's no need to remind everyone again, right? Am I considered a member of the Fukuda group? Jing He asked in a low voice to the new wife Eiji. Isn't this a bit bad? A man. After all, Mr. Shizugawa, you are the author of the manga genre. And everyone in the Fukuda group is called partner and written opponent. Not to mention. What's more, if a cartoonist who can complete a work like Assassination in 2 weeks cannot be regarded as an opponent who should be taken seriously, although Eiji Niizuma didn't say what he said next, he looked at Shizukawa. The eyes full of fighting spirit said it all. Then, there is no more. The manga artist Shizukawa-chan, who was supposed to have nothing to do with the manga artist side Fukuda group, unknowingly became a member of the manga artist side Fukuda group. There is no doubt that all this it's the choice of Steins Gate. The limit of a mortal, as expected, silver-haired brother, you are only at this level. Regardless of the look in his eyes or the tone of his words, everything Takahashi Makoto showed at this moment made the silver-haired brother quite angry. As expected, this is what happened. This is normal for a certain middle-grade cartoonist. Because I cannot listen to God's will as a mortal, I deliberately distort God's will and try to talk to the great God on an equal footing as a mere mortal. Mortal, let me give you a chance to commit suicide and apologize. Chen, you guy, I really want to beat you up. The premise is that the silver-haired brother, you can practice hard. With your current strength, I estimate that you can practice in seclusion for about 1,000 years. There should be a chance to beat Makoto Takahashi, just a very slim chance. Teacher Phoenix Institute, what you want to say, is the incident at the weekly serialization meeting, right? After finishing the low-key conversation with Shizuo Niizuma Eiji just listened to Takahashi Makoto's words, and Takahashi reacted, what is Chen trying to say? I see, I really didn't think about that issue before. There was a serialization meeting. Ajuma Menha, who was a little slow to react, seemed to have reacted after repeating the key words from the second episode of Makoto Takahashi and Eiji Arizuma. No, to be precise, really reacted. The person is the yellow-haired glasses guy in a good gay group, not the blue-eyed classmate who is still looking confused. Do you mean? Lord Phoenix Academy, Shinzuma Eiji-kun, what on earth are you talking about? If Landai's expression can be called confused, then the expression of the little sea otter at this moment can definitely be called confused. Okay, so I'm really sorry for discussing such a complicated matter in front of you, little sea otter. Tisk, so a guy like the King of Black Flame, who has a plug-in skill similar to intuition, is really annoying. Makoto Takahashi, who originally wanted to tempt people, saw his ally sell him like this. The behavior of his teammates showed a rather indignant look, but Makoto Takahashi would not fall out with his new wife Eiji over such a trivial matter. Turning to look at the silver-haired brother Fukuda, who was deep in thought, Takahashi Makoto smiled sadly. "Mortal, do you understand the gap between yourself and the devil now?" "Yes, yes, to a certain extent. I admit that there are some mortals in the world who cannot be explained by common sense. They can not only kill gods and demons with their mortal bodies, so if you want to disobey gods and demons, you must at least have the strength of Master Quay, right? But silver-haired brother, it seems you are still far away from that level." Tisk. I emphasize again, if he couldn't beat him, Fukuda would definitely fight to the death with Makoto Takahashi. HN, is now the time to talk about this. Through the explanation of his good friend, Lande had understood the current problem and decisively interfered with the behavior of a middle school cartoonist who was reaping pleasure from his bad taste. "Yoshida sir, he has already gone to see the editor-in-chief. If we don't come up with a countermeasure before the editor-in-chief comes, then this time, man, everything is under control." Makoto Takahashi put on an expression like everything is fine with me. Makoto Takahashi spoke confidently, which made everyone on the manga side breathe a sigh of relief. Unfortunately, after seeing Makoto Takahashi's next action, everyone on the manga side who had just breathed a sigh of relief became worried again. If the new commander is unwilling to cooperate. Takahashi Makoto slowly opened his white coat, slowly pulled out the magic sword Shattered Star from his waist, showed a fake smile to the cartoonist's side, and said with a rather regretful tone, "Although it is a bit regrettable, I will always remember this short time with the new commander in my heart. Well, I swear. Let's think about how to convince the editor-in-chief." Pingza later, the yellow-haired man with glasses pushed his glasses and suggested to the cartoonist's side with a serious face, "Ahem, a certain yellow-haired man deliberately chose to ignore a certain middle school cartoonist when he spoke." "Yes, yes," the cartoonist's side echoed, "of course, like the yellow-haired man with glasses, the cartoonist's side also chose to ignore the words and deeds of a certain middle school cartoonist who cannot be persuaded by reason, then force." Tisk. Silence and deliberate ignorance. Every time it comes to this, my cat is like this, and you are like this too. A certain Chuyunibu cartoonist did not feel excluded, but just had some resentment. "If you have any dissatisfaction with me, you can just say it directly." Tisk. Is it really necessary to go to this extent? Speaking of Takahashi Makoto, when you said this, could you look in the mirror and see your expression? Not to mention the murderous aura, your pupils have already dilated. Recently, it is close to the end of the year, and I am a little busy with work. Please forgive me. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 502. According to the information gathered by my cat and Sebastian, every time a new serialized manga manuscript is submitted at the serialization meeting, there will be a limit on the quantity. By the way, usually, every time the number of new serials used in Shonen Jump will not exceed 3, ignoring the weird looks from his fellow cartoonists, and even ignoring his previous weird remarks. A certain middle-class cartoonist took advantage of the bottle editor to talk to him. Before Yoshida even arrived at the conference room, he finally pointed out the most troublesome and insurmountable problem in the serialization meeting. According to the model of previous serialization conferences, if a large number of comic manuscripts are submitted, then except for the comics that are the first to qualify for serialization, the remaining comics will be directly eliminated. What? Except for Eiji Shinzuma and Mumenha Aho, the remaining 3 cartoonists on the cartoonist side said in unison, and their faces became quite ugly. According to what you said, Aiken, that is to say, as long as the number of new serials is enough, the editors who participated in the serialization meeting will not even take a look at the comic manuscripts we have worked so hard to complete, and will just give up. Or will it be postponed to the next serialization? the silver-haired boy Fukuda slapped the table angrily and yelled at his fellow cartoonists who looked unhappy, "Hey! This is what a bastard is doing. What do the editors who participated in the serialization think of our comics? Hey, Cheng." The yellow-haired glasses man pushed up his glasses and asked with some doubts, "Let's not talk about whether what you just told us is accurate. How on earth do you know this information? Mr. Yoshida, as it's impossible for the editor-in-chief of the weekly to tell you this, right? Now is not the time to pursue this issue." The silver-haired brother Fukuda's resentment has not dissipated, and he interrupted Yachin Mumanjai's doubts with dissatisfaction. "If it is really like what Aiken said, this competition has no meaning at all. Luck is also the key to winning or losing, although I really want to say this, it feels quite unfair to tell the winner in this situation." Eiji Niizuma suppressed the smile on his face for the first time. With a serious expression, "Besides, everyone should be very confident in their own comics. If the key to determining victory or defeat is not the comics themselves, but all depends on luck, I feel that this duel will become very boring. So the limit on the number of new serials, this is the most critical and thorny issue." Makoto Takahashi, as the initiator of Super Smash Bros., saw the indignant looks on everyone's faces beside the cartoonist and was satisfied. Nodding, "So, gentlemen, have you made your decision now?" "Huh? Decide for what?" The silver-haired boy Fukuda looked at Makoto Takahashi curiously. "You already have a decisive solution." "Fukuda-san, don't ask." A certain gay group, with a synchronization rate that broke through the sky, spoke at the same time to stop Fukuda from questioning. "Don't." The former assistant of a certain middle school cartoonist also joined the hinderer camp. "Are you willing to continue to bow your head and be driven like slaves? Are you willing to continue to support such cruel decisions? Don't you ever long for justice? Don't you ever yearn for freedom?" However, it is already too late. Makoto Takahashi, the crazy Chi-2 mode has been completely turned on. The best thing to do at this time is of course to launch a rebellion, overthrow the completely corrupt decision-making team, and change this rotten world. Ha 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 ha. The silver-haired brother Fukuda finally understood why his colleagues tried so hard to stop him from questioning Takahashi Makoto. By the way, among all the cartoonists, only the silver-haired brother Fukuda has relatively little contact with Makoto Takahashi, so he doesn't really understand the behavior of a middle-class cartoonist. However, after today's meeting with the cartoonist, the silver-haired boy Fukuda should, no, he will definitely update his understanding of a certain middle-class cartoonist. "Teacher, please stop joking." At the critical moment, Jing He, who was once an assistant and now considers himself a disciple, stood up and said, "Mr. Yoshida has already gone to find the editor. If we no longer get along well before the editor comes, then I'm afraid." "Yeah, that's what I said. Teacher Phoenix Academy, you don't want this great brawl to end before it even begins, right?" Eiji Niizuma has the most contact with Takahashi Makoto as an ally, so he is also the most familiar with it. How to deal with a certain middle-class cartoonist. So after seeing Makoto Takahashi stop laughing wildly and a crazy light flashing in his eyes, Eiji Niizuma promptly added, "Of course, force and coercion are prohibited." "Hey," Makoto Takahashi curled his lips in displeasure, then turned his gaze to the good gay group aside. After pondering for a moment, he sighed helplessly, "Okay. In addition to force and coercion, now there are also the method that can be used is." Being stared at by the enthusiastic eyes of a certain middle school cartoonist, the gay friends of Aiken Mumenjai instantly felt a chill. Leaving aside the plans discussed by the cartoonists here, Yoshida is currently reporting to the editor-in-chief Bottle on the relevant situation of this great battle. Of course, as a qualified editor-in-chief, when Yoshida reports the situation to the editor-in-chief, not only did he briefly talk about the new cartoons of all the cartoonists, but he also included his own relevant opinions as the editor-in-chief. "I already understand the situation. The editor-in-chief of the bottle crossed his hands and clapped his chin, his glasses flashed with the legendary white light. By the way, does every high-ranking boss like Commander Akari's signature pose? The former editor-in-chief Sasaki, the current editor-in-chief Bottle, and even the four-eyed fox Chen Ben, who has not appeared for a long time, seem to like to pose with this deterrence and shock effect when meeting with his subordinates. So editor-in-chief, what do you think? Yoshida, you go down and summon their editors first. The editor-in-chief of Bottle did not think for a long time, but directly asked Yoshida to summon the editors on the cartoonist side. Following the previous model of submitting new serials, let each responsible editor first review the comic manuscripts of the cartoonists he is responsible for. Regarding the serialization, I will go down and deal with it personally later. I see. After watching Yoshida leave, the editor-in-chief of Bottle let out a long sigh, stared at the rows of sample issues of the weekly Shonen Jump on the bookshelf next to him, and fell into silence. The situation with the serialization, it's been a long time coming. After sighing a little, the editor-in-chief Pingze picked up the phone on the table. This is Pingze, the editor-in-chief of the weekly Shonen Jump. Please help me pick up editor-in-chief Sasaki. Dear readers, I am very busy with work at the end of the year, so I am very sorry.